Page 6, 4 lines from the top of the page. The subject is the conflict between Melechet Shabbat and Biat Mitzvah. The idea is that the Torah tells us we should keep the Shabbat, the Sabbath, as a holy, a rest day. The rabbis elaborates and tells us that there are 39 types of work that we are prohibited to do on Shabbat. One of them is creating any manner of Chabalah. Can be, for example, slaughtering animals that creating damage. Can be pulling out some manner of hunting or creating blood that's streaming out of something. All of those manner of work are prohibited to do on Shabbat. The question is, we explained in the past several days that when it's come to a first relation between husband and wife, it turns, as much as they wanted in those days to do it on a particular day, which was Wednesday, and we explained that the Bet Din, the court session, those days was designated purposely to do on Thursday. What happened if for some reason they did not cohabit it, and it turns to Shabbat's time, such as Friday night? Is that the conflict between, in one hand, the mitzvah of cohabitation between the newly groom and bride? On the other hand, there is a prohibition against creating damage, and by merely fact that they are in the intercourse matter, it's involved with some type of blood streaming of her body at that time. So we went yesterday, just the last point of yesterday, the vignette, involved with four motions. 4 motions in the sense of the sages' discussions. The first one, it's called Mipkad Pakid or Chabui Mechabar, which means what exactly, anatomically speaking, what exactly happened in that lady girl when she's losing her virginity. In a sense, the sages are so erudite in a medical field, for sure some of them are well known, so they analyze what exactly happened in her body at that time. In a sense, is that a block of blood that collected in a manner of, for the lucid English, like a box that you basically open and it's drilled out, or you say that it happens by its merely nature of the relation.
By an injury, as a result of an injury. The one is whether the blood was just stored there and was just released, and the other way is whether the actual injury caused it to bleed.
Yeah. So one is called Mifkat Pakidu Chabui Mechabar, that's the language. The second notion was if it's considering blood, or Lepetach Hu Tzarich, which means in order for him in those days
creating an opening, essentially.
Like you had an opening for certain reason.
Right.
You see in many cultures to this very day. I saw it when I was in service in Lebanon and Gaza, that in some Middle Eastern culture they do that too. It's the idea that it's like in their world is like honoring the family. They want to make sure that she's virgin, that blood's coming out. So the next morning he needs to bring the towel, the sheets that prove that it's blood coming out. So that's the question: is what exactly involved? It's involved with natural blood, or involved that he is in need of petach. Then the third notion is halacha follow Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Shimon, and then the fourth one is even you tell me that halacha follow Rabbi Yehuda. Maybe it's called mekalkel etzel hapetach. As you know, that there is a different formulation of kilkul, lehavdil, just for some type of allegorical or metaphorical understanding. When you need to open a container, there are a few ways to open the container. There is a regular manner, which is you use the materials, and there is a damages manner that you can open it in a different way. So Tosfot tells us, according to Mishna, at the beginning of this tractate, that the whole notion is that to be close to the date of the session of Bet Din, which is Thursday, and the question is why you need to have the motion of waiting till that day. So the idea is that they got married on Wednesday, and then for some reason they did not cohabitate on Wednesday or Thursday. Now the question is, then it happens on Friday night, and Tosfot have one idea that maybe is considering a tzovea. It's one of the notion, it's one of the melachot involved with, for the best ways, like painting, using coloring, or anyway, that's one school of thought. But then we ended yesterday by saying that there are two schools of thought. One is Rav and one is Shmuel. That they said that one is said it's okay, one said it is not, and Chatam Sofer said, following Yavetz, he followed this important Rashi that said 4 lines from the top of the page, דברי רב שצריכים לעשות כדברי רבן, אומרים שרבן התיר. So the idea is you have to differentiate between Talmid Muvhak, you have your own teacher, that is your permanent teacher, and you are permanent students, versus if you live in a city, they have Mara Deatra, they have a teacher, they have the rabbi, but it can change, which means a different rabbi taking over and there's different rules. So if you go by the Talmidim Muvhakim, which was that time, therefore it's staying the way that your permanent teacher tells you. Otherwise, you can switch. So now we are 4 lines from top of page 6. Verav Sharei, do you meant to say, if you follow this school of thought, that did Rav allow to have a relation with a virgin on Shabbat because he holds the manner of davar she'eino mitkaven mutar? Let's elaborate on something that we study a lot on Tractate Shabbat. By any chance, anyone remember the concept of davar she'eino mitkaven? Can someone help me? What is davar she'eino mitkaven? You have an intent to do something, and something happened.
As a result, yeah.
As a result. So davar she'eino
coincidentally,
mitkaven,
something happened
meaning,
coincidentally. Right?
For example, for our case, he may not intend to pull out the blood from her.
Right.
He may intend just to cohabit with her.
Right.
And soon you see examples of intention not to have a manner of which creating a stream of blood.
Right.
Which means sometimes it can be deep in a tube that a person not have the intent, or he have all kind of manipulation not to have a blood stream out of her, in somehow either she stained virginity or it will be without his intent. So in general term, we say that, for example, when a person does something, some action, and something happened as a result, so according to this school of thought, davar she'eino mitkaven, if you not intend to do certain melachot, it's permissible. ואמר רב שימי בר חזקיה משמי דרב, היי מסוחריה דנזייתא, אסור לאדוקה ביום הטבע. Here we talk about the ancient barrel of wine. What happened to the barrel of wine? Anyone have a chance to visit those wine cellars, those places? So nowadays we have those faucet, right? That you open, tap and pull out the wine, correct? In those days, they used to have some type of heavy-duty towel that the hole was put in the barrel, was put and closed by that towel, meaning that the moment you move it or push it, is pulling out the wine from that hole. So they said that it's called mesocharia denaizaita. That's the way they do it in those days. So the moment you do it, you're not allowed to tighten it on Shabbat and also Yom Tov. Why? One school of thought said that is schita. It's like matter of you squeezing. So that's tolada. That's a consequence of melacha, of type of work that is called melaben. Melaben in general is someone who is in a manner of heavy-duty cleaning. Because the reality is, by squeezing it, that towel changed. There are others who say that that's melechet dash, which means it's like the Tosfot tells us that when you go the field at the time of the growth of the crops, and you take the wheat, so you pull it out, the hay, some of that move out and some of that stay. So basically by doing so, you're changing the status. So he said, even the one who tightening it, tightening it, does not intend to close that hole, but it's something that a person should not do, because he holds that this is the violation of Shabbat. So now you should know that is a machloket rishonim, is a disputation among the early sages. What's the reason that this is a problem, that is prohibited? In the ancient time, it was the way that they do that. Rashi said that it's a schita, it's libun. Tosfot said that it's mefarek yain mitoch habeged, which means this is basically a contradiction to what Rav said earlier. Earlier what we said, that davar she'eino mitkaven, if you not intend to do something and it happens, is permissible. Here you see the opposite way, that it's not. So the Gemara response said, behahu, in that case, afilu Rabbi Shimon modeh, in that case, even Rabbi Shimon agree upon that what? The Abaye ורבד, אמרת רבה, הוא מודה רבי שמעון בפסיק רישי ולא ימות. So he said that even Rabbi Shimon concede that here you have a case that Rabbi Shimon said, דבר שאינו מתכוון, if you don't intend to do it in general, it's okay, versus here, he agreed that it's not. Why? Because think about it, when you have this huge barrel of wine, and you open that hole, it's not a regular manner of modern days. You use that heavy-duty towel to squeeze, to open that hole, and then the wine was streaming out. So it's actually, the reality is, we compare it to a famous statement, you cut off its head and he will not die. So think about chicken. The chicken, when you cut off the head, it may turns that they run for a few seconds, right? A minute even, or two, but eventually they die. So the case that involve inevitable consequences, like the situation here of the decapitation of an animal, that the action is forbidden, so here the liquid will inevitably be squeezed from its cloth. So therefore, here even Rabbi Shimon agreed that it's prohibited. So now, if we juxtapose that to our case, so according to Rabbi Shimon, it's okay. Why? Because he intend to, in a sense, to have the joy, the pleasure of the cohabitation, and he's not intend to do the violation of Shabbat. So now you see a non-contradiction in the word of Rahab, because if you are saying that it's prohibited to do this type of tightening in a barrel of wine, it's by all means uncomparable to our case of cohabitation on Shabbat with a new virgin. והא אמר רב חייא בר אשי אמר רב, הלכה כרבי יהודה ורב חנן בר עמי אמר שמואל, הלכה כרבי שמעון, ורב חייא בר אבין מתנה לה בלא גברי, רב אמר הלכה כרבי יהודה ושמואל אמר הלכה כרבי שמעון. So the question is, again, if you tell me that it's the issue of the intent, how come he hold that you can do that on Shabbat? So here, it's important to note the whole Tosfot notion here. Tosfot tells us, just give you the abbreviation, according to Rabbeinu Tam, he said the idea is mefarek, you're basically disconnected part. Imagine in a simple way, you have a children's Lego, right? So I dismantle the pieces, and by doing so it's called kol psik reishe de lo nichalei shari. So even he is putting inside the barrel this cloth, and he is not intent to have the wine, to squeeze the wine, because the reality is he's losing some of his wine by doing so. So again, since the intent is not, according to Rabbeinu Time's avenue, it's not an issue. So now, how we reconcile? The question remains up, which is, in one place we say that davar she'eno mitkaven, if you don't intend to do it, is prohibited. The other place we say that it's okay. So he said, לעולם רב כי רבי יהודה סביר עלי, להכליל שנדאמר דם נפקד פקיד, מקלקלו אצל הפתח. So here, just, again, I'm using a little bit euphemism to express that meaning, which is, if you intend to fix something, the same way, both ways. I used earlier the term of container. You have a container, you have few ways to open the container. You can do it by regular utensil. You can use a weird utensil, like I saw people the other day, they want to open a coconut, they start using hammer, and putting nails and all kind of things. And there are other utensils to open a coconut. So it's several ways to do things. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you're allowed to do this cohabitation on Shabbat because Rabbi Yehuda hold that only something that is with the person intent to do so. But if here is basically mekalkel, he's changing the status, להחליש נדאמר דם חבורי מחבר, mekalkel בחבורה הוא. So he said, the reality is that, according to that version that said that blood is flowing through the blood vessels attached to the body, he is destructive, causing the wound, and Rabbi Yehuda concede that he is permitted. So you see here both views. Regardless if it's Rav or Shmuel, you're allowed to do that on Shabbat, either because he intended, Tosfot said, to have entrance, petach, or he intended to bring the blood out, and the blood, we differentiate between the blood that coming out of losing the virginity, the regular blood of nida. So that's happened only by having chabura, by having this type of relation. So now, since we are in a notion that Shmuel hold that this is a problem to do on Shabbat, and we see here conflicted sources. So we need to reconcile it, because the question remains up. We have the 39 melachot that prohibited on Shabbat, and either you go by melechet shochet, slaughtering, that you're pulling out the blood, or you go by tzovea, or you go by mefarek, or there's all kind of avenues how you treated that. The question is, if it happens instead of Wednesday, as we said in the past several days, they did not cohabitate on Wednesday or Thursday, and now it's Friday night, if it's a violation of Shabbat by cohabitation. So you see here, we bring a new source, which is Tractate Nida, page 64b, Metiv Rav Chizda, Tinoket shelo higia zmana lirot. So let's understand, before we go further with this, the two avenues that we reach so far, and just remember, we are not in a practical halachot yet, okay? So the first avenue is Rav. Rav said that davar she'eno mitkaven, if you are, again, when it's come to Shabbat, we differentiate, we are very crucial, if you remember in Shabbat, to know what is in your intent, what is your kavanah. And Rav hold that if you do not intend to do something, so it is prohibited, but he said here, it's tzad kilkul bepetach haisha, that it's some type of destructive manner that created, versus Shmuel that said at the first place, the davar she'eno mitkaven mutar, that you're allowed to do it. So with that said, here you have a source that said, when you have a tinoket, you have a young girl, shelo higia zmana lirot, that she's not reached a time to see the flow of menstruation blood has arrived. She's not yet reached that stage in her life. So the Gemara in Nida said that in very general term, it's the bat mitzvah, it's 12 years and 1 day, that's time, the same as with manner of a boy, that they have 2 hair. So they said veniset, and she got married. בית שמאי אומרים נותנים לה 4 לילות, ובית הלל אומרים עד שתחיה המכה. בית שמאי hold that you have a period of 4 nights. The idea of 4 nights that she may engage in intercourse as any blood is attributed to that manner of losing the virginity, because we differentiate, as we said, between the 2 type of blood, versus Beit Hillel said that until the wound heal. So you see here how erudite the rabbis when it's come to anatomy. He said הגיע זמנה לראות, when she reached the time that she have a regular menstruation period, but it doesn't happen yet, ונישאת, and she got married. בית שמאי אומרים נותנים לה לילה ראשון. בית שמאי said, we assume that every blood she see at the first night is come from losing her virginity, and therefore the husband can cohabit it with her more than once. In general, as you know, that is an issue, biblical issue of cohabitation while they have nidut, meaning the time of the period that is prohibited. ובית הלל אומרים עד מוצאי שבת 4 לילות. So if you count, as you remember, we're all going from the point of departure of Wednesday, if you remember, right? So here you go by Wednesday 4 nights. So how you count it? So you have the eve of the 5th, eve of Thursday, you have the eve of Friday, and then the 7th until Motzei Shabbat, until after Shabbat. So if you have the assumption that all these 4 nights, any blood that comes out, it's considering only dam betulim, it's only blood that come out because of the loss of the virginity, meaning that this is the during this period any blood is attributed to the wound, and she's permitted to her husband. 6b, my love. So what are you referring here? The ilo baal matze ba'il afilu b'shabbat. If whatever the reason is, they did not cohabit, it can be endless reasons. For example, he was drunk, right, after the wedding. For example, he wasn't ready. It can be a lot of things, okay? If it did not happen, so it can allow, by this view, all these 4 nights, even when it's come to the Shabbat. So here you see a conflict of sources, because here you see that that even it's in Shabbat, we have the conflict in one hand, Beilat mitzvah, the mitzvah of the first cohabitation. On the other hand, they have the issue of Shabbat violation. And here you see that it's okay. So Amar Rava lo, Rava responded and said, Levar mi Shabbat. Rava said no. The Mishnah doesn't mean to say that he can cohabitate it with her all the 4 nights. He meant to say that dependency on the bloodstream can go up to the 4 nights. That's the way the Shita Mekubetzet explains. So Abaye challenges us, Amar le Abaye ve'ad motzei Shabbat 4 lot kan, and we know basic math, right? So you go by that time until the end of Shabbat, you count 4 nights. So it means that each and every night of the 4 nights is allowed, including a Friday night. Here we talk about the case that he is fully cohabited with her at the first night, but we still hold that since it was the first time, it's connected to that original loss of virginity, which means it's not an independent period that occurred. So he said, Ik she'ba'al, the Gemara said, Maika mashmelan. So what exactly it's the chidush? What do you try to tell us? He said, Kamashman the shara lemival b'Shabbat. This is the key, the point of departure, that even that she lost her virginity earlier, but and you may concern that it may be not fully, and still blood stream out of her. It's still okay to do it on Shabbat, כי דאמר שמואל פרצה דחוקה מותר להיכנס בשבת אף על פי שמשאיר צרורות. Here again we're using a euphemism, using a different source to to explain this concept. So the idea is you have an entrance, a regular manner of which people enter from one domain to another. For example, you have a wall between houses or in the aisle or etc., etc. And that's not sufficient for a person to enter. So it happens that while he or she entered to that gate, it happened that some of the stones fall out. So again, the person not intend, remember that's the whole idea, you not intend to start breaking stones from the gates, he intend just to pass by that gate. So here we juxtapose to our manner, so he said even that is some type of chabala, some type of wound that occurred during that cohabitation. Because of this quandary, we don't put a boundary and prohibited, and that's the beauty of this innovative Mishnah, try to tell us that the 4 nights, yes, it's included Friday night.
Now, just a quick question. The counting of the nights presumes that the wedding is Yom Revi'i during the day.
No, good question.
Because if you get married on Tuesday night.
Eve of Wednesday.
But if you get married Tuesday night, then the first night is Tuesday night.
No, those days is no electricity.
Right.
But you can cohabit on the first night.
Which is what? When?
Well, but you're saying because there's no electricity, they couldn't have had a wedding on Tuesday night?
No, the point is that the cohabitation can take place at any time.
Well, I understand, but I'm saying if they got married on Tuesday night, which is Yom Revi'i.
Oh, no, so?
So then the first night that they would cohabit could be Tuesday night, which is...
So what's the question?
So then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, it's 5.
Yes, but Friday night is part of the issue. We are talking about...
Well, I understand, but when they say 4, including Friday, they presume that the wedding's during the day on Wednesday.
Those days, it's usually the wedding was Wednesday.
Okay, so it normally didn't happen on Tuesday night.
It was the relation, it's called Bait Afel.
Okay.
Because it's no electricity.
Well, that's what I was wondering.
As long as there's no light, so the people cohabited. The whole goal is to have him come with Tanat Petach Patuach on Thursday.
But they generally didn't get married on Tuesday night.
No, generally it was Wednesday.
Yeah, Wednesday during the day. Okay, that's what it was. Yeah.
I will say this: it's a possibility that they married Tuesday night, as long that's one of the early discussion yesterday. As long as we know that he will come to our Bet Din on Thursday.
On Thursday, right? Yeah, because it's
Mativ Rav Yosef. Here we ask from different sources. This is something we study in Tractate Brachot, page 16. Chatan patur mikriyat Shema balayla harishon. Ad Motzei Shabbat, a groom that's so occupied with the mitzvah of the wedding, so we know that ha'osek b'mitzvah patur min mitzvah. If you're occupied with one mitzvah, for example, if you are now taking care of the dead body, so you're exempt from doing other mitzvot. For example, to go to shul and daven, because right, because you are occupied with taking care of a dead body that no one's taking care of, for example, right? So here the chatan, the groom, he marry. Here we talk specifically about the first marriage. He marry a virgin, etc., etc. So he is exempt from kriyat shema at the eve, the first night, until the Mishnah said ad motzei Shabbat, until Saturday night. Im lo asa ma'aseh. So this is one condition, that he's not cohabitated yet. So the Rambam explained to us in Pirush Mishnayot, he said, his mind is so much with the mitzvah of being fruitful and multiply, so he exempt from another mitzvah of reciting the Shema. And now, the truth is that this exemption it's carry on until the 4th night, or if he cohabited with her earlier. So meaning, if he did not cohabited with her until Saturday night, he's still under that exemption. Or if he cohabited with her the first night, so until he passed that borderline, he is in exemption. The Shita Mekubeset have a question that's very similar to what David asked, is that exemption go by the end of the 4th day or not? So that's if it's gone the extension of Motzei Shabbat. Anyway, so the Gemara said in Brachot 16 that applies solely or the marriage with a virgin. Why? Because he have a feeling toward her, and he is thinking about the way that he will be the least pain and the least damage to her, right? It's his mindset. So he's so occupied, he wants to have the mitzvah, he wants to cohabit with her, but he doesn't want her to be hurt.
Doesn't want to hurt her, right?
Right? So since he's so occupied with that mitzvah, we exempt him from reciting the Shema. My love, ditrid deba'ei lemiv'al, that he's so occupied with all of that. So what we prove indirectly, that if they did not cohabited on Wednesday or Thursday, so it can happen on Friday night, and that's disputed what Shmuel said earlier. Amar le Abaye responded to Rav Yosef, and he said, Lo, ditrid velo ba'il. So they said, no, do you know what's the story? That he is exempt from reciting the Shema because he is preoccupied due to the fact that he did not yet engage in intercourse with her, and is no proof that may cited with regard to engaging in intercourse on Shabbat. So you have here Tosfot, you have Shita Mekubetzet, how exactly you count those days, etc. Amar le Rava umishum tirda patu. So because he's so occupied, he is free. So guess what? Every time you have any type of mitzvah, you can say, oh, I'm busy with that mitzvah, I'm exempt. And Kriyat Shema, reciting Shema is the oraita, it's a biblical. Ela me'ata, here is some example. God forbid, tav'as pinato bayam. So someone has his boat sank, God forbid, in the water. So he's so in a huge sorrow for losing so much money, right? Achenami de patur. He's also exempt from Kriyat Shema because he's so in such a grief. If you tell me that that's correct, mourner is obligated to all the mitzvot in the Torah, חוץ מן התפילין שנאמר בהם פאר, excluding the tefillin, because the Ezekiel 24 used the term פארך חבוש עליך, which means the glory of your beauty, it's on you. So since a mourner is in a state of gloom and doom, right, and his head is spinning, right, so it's not appropriate, it's incongruous to have the tefillin on the top of his head. So what do you derive from that? That the mourner even is in a great sorrow, but he is obligated to all the mitzvot, including the mitzvah of Kriyat Shema. So it means just a regular preoccupation is not sufficient to have a person exempt from Kriyat Shema. Only something that it's involved with the preparation for the mitzvah, and he was occupied with that or that moment. So here, since the Mishnah in the Tractate Brachot tells us that Chatan, that the new groom, is exempt from reciting Shema on Friday night, so what you see from that the groom, we have the concept that he is occupied with Bilat Mitzvah, and the Mishnah allow him to do it even lechatchila, again, only with the case of virgin, on Shabbat. And that's basically the opposite, is a contradiction to what Shmuel tells us. Amarava, the Mishnah that exempted Chatan, a groom, from saying Kriyat Shema at the eve of Shabbat, it still allow him to have cohabitation Shabbat Tanaihi. It's depend upon disputation of the early Tanaim. Why? The Tana Chada, one hold, Im lo asa ma'aseh barishon, if at the eve of Thursday not cohabited, then Patur av basheni, which is the eve of Friday, basheni Patur bashlishi. So again, it's all in the manner of which he did not cohabited. The Tanya Idach, and the second brayta that speaks about the exemption of Kriyat Shema, Rishon v'Sheni Patur, the first 2 nights of the marriage he is exempt, which is the eve of Thursday and the eve of Friday. Shlishi Chayav, the eve of Shabbat is obligated in Shema, because, as we said, there is a notion that you cannot do it on Shabbat. So, here, the question is, why the second brayta obligated the groom for saying Kriyat Shema. Ve'abaye hatam nabe bitrida kamiflige. So here, if you go by the Abaye, the two reasons that the Brightot hold that you should not do it lechatchila on Shabbat, what's the reason? He said, Hatam, the reason is that he's preoccupied with the Tanaim degree. So basically the idea here is, Rashi explained beautifully, it's a big chidush in Rashi. Rashi said here, I'll just give you the abbreviation. He said that if we compare a groom to a mourner, let's think together. Right. What's the real difference between the two? The groom is disappointed. He wants to have these mitzvah cohabitations, and we said we have an issue with Shabbat, right? The sorrow of the mourner is the sorrow of the lost. So Rashi said, and the Shita Mekubeset explained it, that when it's come to a mourner, is different. The avelut itself is not a mitzvah. This is something that people constantly misconstrue. The idea of mourning over the loss of loved one. Even we have the minagei avelut, all the rules of avelut, which is the idea of washing, the covering the mirrors when you daven, not wearing shoe, etc., etc. All the laws that apply to mourners. Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, my teacher, one of my rabbis, in a book, one of his books is called Minchat Shlomo. So he explained that the idea is, the Rashi said in Tractate Sukkah, page 25, that the whole chiyuv avelut, the whole obligation to show mourners, is just kvod meito, to show people that he respect the deceased, the loved one. But by the same token, he is not obligated to feel agony, right? That's not part of the mourner. So he said, if that's the case, Shlomo Zalman asked, so why he cannot study Torah, a mourner? Again, if you tell me that his obligation is to do what? To show respect for the deceased, so why we prohibited him to study Torah? So the answer we try to say is, King David tells us in the book of Psalms, Pikudei Hashem yesharim mesamchei lev. He said that the study of Torah brings the rejoicement to a person's heart. This is something that it's hard for people who are not involved in life of Torah to understand. But I know for my teachers, the day without Torah, it's like bring the fish out of the water. Mm-hmm. So therefore, you have to differentiate between showing something that others will see versus rejoicement you have in your heart. I remember one of the students came to my teacher and she asked, he was the advisor and assistant principal of one of the girls' schools in Israel. So it's a religious school. The girl came, the parents have a horrible divorce, and she lived with her mother, and the father was Pegara, was a horrible man, horrible. And in some ways it was a celebration for her and the mother when the father was no longer among the living. Mm. So she came and she asked my teacher, was I obligated to mourn? So it's based on this idea that you have to differentiate between rituals, such as show respect to the deceased, and the feeling you have in your heart. So Shlomo Zalman said that anything that avoiding you from fulfilling a mitzvot, you're not obligated. You're only obligated to show respect to the deceased. Moshe Feinstein said that we have to differentiate between bchi, between crying, that it's okay, and tsar. Tsar, it means great agony, great sorrow. This is, by all means, you don't obligate it. So in some way, you see a machloket achronim, two different avenues between Rabbi Shlomo Zalman and Moshe Feinstein, how to understand this Rashi. Anyway, This is fascinating. Rashi, I wish to have more time to elaborate because it's a lot to talk. Especially you see it in the way that the Rambam understands this, and the way that the Shita Mikubetzet explained, etc. V'hanetanai ki hanetanai. So this disputation in regards to exemption of Chatan from saying Kriyat Shema, one said that he can cohabit it on Shabbat, and the other one said no. The Tanya, HaKoneset Abtula, Lo Yiv'ol Batchila B'Shabbat. If someone marry a virgin at the, how do you say, the initio, the way that you wish to, at the first place, they should not cohabitate on Shabbat. V'chachamim atirim. The majority of the sages say that it's okay. Man chachamim, who are these majority of the sages referring to? Amar Rabbah, Rabbi Shimoni. The Amar davar she'ein mitkaven mutar. That's a source for something that we have a lot in many places. Tosfot Arosh explains, and others, that the big question in that manner of cohabitation is what exactly happened anatomically in her body. Is that Yetzirat Chabura? No, someone can translate that. Yetzirat Chabura is creating a wound.
It's an injury, creating an injury.
Or right. Yotzer Petach Binyan.
Which is just essentially creating an opening that...
like a builder.
Yeah, creating an opening, and the blood is essentially consequential to that. Is not a result of the injury specifically, but it's a result of the opening allowing the blood to flow out.
So
the
in
blood
simple
was already
English,
there.
The way that the Ritva and Tosfot Rosh said, the groom intends to have his own pleasure, own rejoicement. He is not intent to create the blood. The blood happened as a result of that intercourse. So therefore, that's the notion of saying that it's okay to do it, right? Amar le'Abaye ve'amodeh Rabbi Shimon b'fsik reishe v'lo yamut. You remember we talked about the chicken? You cut off the head and the chicken will not survive in a long time. And so you can use this term on Ilchot Shabbat, you use it also here. Amar lei lo kehalalu bavliyim she'en bki'im b'hataya ela yesh bki'im b'hataya.
So now, is Rabbi Shimon saying then it's saying it's a matter of what his intent is, and not a matter of whether it's actually a result of injury or creating an opening? He's saying it's whatever the intent of the groom was. So not whether it's actually is an injury or not. Whether it's more what his intent.
As long as what he had, because you remember in Chot Shabbat, the crucial part in Shabbat is what exactly you have in your mind.
So even if his intent is to create an opening, then and consequentially he injures her, and there's blood as a result of the injury. The intent was to, but this is what Rabbi Shimon's saying is that the intent was to open, so therefore it's.
But here we go to the next stage.
Okay.
No, I thought Shimon was against it.
Rabbi Shimon said דבר שלא מתכוון מותר, that he allow.
Right, and they're saying, but what Rabbi Shimon's saying is, the way I understand it is, it's not about what the actual cause was, it's what his intent was. And if his intent was to create an opening and cause an injury as a result, it's allowed.
Furthermore, if you read here Rashi and Tosfot, I just give you the abbreviation, they use the word here, diverting. What does that mean? So Tosfot said here, Lo kalalu bavlim, this is not like the Babylonian, פירוש אינו פסיק רישה, לכל העולם אינם כמו בבלין אלא בקיינן. The idea is that a person who's familiar with how to have it in a sense that you can have the intercourse without creating bloodstream.
Yeah, they say here in the description, i.e. they penetrate the vagina at an angle in such a way that the hymen is not ruptured and no bleeding occurs. So likewise, a passageway is not created.
So that's basically, according to this Tosfot, it's not a matter of psik reisha, it's not the manner of which you compare to cutting head. So the Gemara said, Im ken tored lama. If that's the case, so why is there is a preoccupation that renders his exempt from reciting Shema? The Rishonim say that he's not intent to have Bilah Gemura. So you don't have the Torah. So they said L'she'eno baki, someone who's not familiar. So they said, Yomru baki mutar she'eno baki asu. That's ridiculous. You tell me that only people who are familiar of how to do as they're allowed, and people who are not familiar are not. So the Gemara said, this is a big chidush, the Gemara said, Rov ki inhen. most of the people are familiar of how to do it. So Tosfot tells us here, "V'chol chad v'chad mesapkin alei berov." So he said, let's face it, a person is a young groom, right? He's not, so people doesn't know in advance if you are familiar, if you are know, or you don't know. So the idea is, according to this Tosfot, you have to have some mentor, someone who explained to you in advance, and therefore you are part. So again, his intent is not to create blood on Shabbat. So therefore, you don't have the psik reisha. אמר לרב חנן לאביי, אלא מעתה שושבינים למה, מפה למה. So I explained in my book on Rashi. Rashi said here, שושבינים למה, מאחר שיש בקיאים לבעול בלא דם, because there are those who are familiar to do it without blood, as we explained on the Ketubot, page 12, so, כלומר לבקר אחריהם שלא ינהגו בהם רמאות בטענה בתולים. So the idea is, in those days in particular, they have shushvinim, they have those people who are basically make sure that it's no cheating. What's the idea? That sometimes he comes out and he wants to say, oh, guess what happened? I found her that she wasn't virgin. And he's basically doing that for all kind of reasons. Or from her side, we're going to study it on page 12, that she wasn't virgin and she used something to show that she used a different blood from different source to show that, and since it's all cohabitation on the dark, so the question is, if you tell me that rov bkiinen, so why you need all of that? Mapa lama? So why you need to go to that manner of need of mapa? אמר להתם שמא יראה ויאבד. So here again, you talk usually of people who are, the best description is the cheaters. So you have a situation that he's destroyed intentionally. So if he seeks to engage in intercourse and keep the Haim intact, he can do so. However, if he engages in a full-fledged intercourse and the Haim is erupted, the sages sought to ensure that the facts are clear. So here you see in conclusion the whole idea of, and we're not yet in a practical halachot, but the whole idea is that most of the people are familiar of that, and therefore it's not an issue on Shabbat. Now, in nowadays we don't go for Wednesday, so it's not even an issue. But let me show you just one practical halachot, which is the Rambam, Ilchot Kriyat Shema, chapter 4, and also Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 70. A groom who married a virgin is exempt from reciting Shema until he consummates the marriage, because he is preoccupied that he will discover that she is not virgin. Since he is preoccupied with the performance of the mitzvah, he is exempt from performing another. If he is not engaged in this type of relation 3 nights after wedding, he is obligated to recite Shema, since he is more comfortable with his bride and no longer preoccupied. That exemption applied either applied in the early generation. However, today most people typically recite Shema without the proper intent. So a groom who married a virgin recites Shema well. So that's the practical halachot that we do say Kriyat Shema. Now we also talk about avelut. So it is prohibited for a mourner to put a tefillin on the day of the burial for the same manner that he is avel. When it's come to that manner, he is very preoccupied, and that's Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 38.
Boyachem leshuloim malachai yeshuloim malachai